The night sky above Earth was quiet, but far beyond the atmosphere, chaos was unfolding. An alien diplomat named Liara had been traveling through the outer edge of the human system. Her ship was small, elegant, built for peace, not war. She was a messenger between worlds, carrying promises of trade and knowledge. But that night, her mission was shattered. Her ship came under sudden attack. Unknown fighters surrounded her vessel, their weapons cutting through metal like knives through cloth. The control panel sparked, alarms screamed, and flames spread through the corridors. Liara tried to send a distress signal, but the enemy jammed her communication. Her heart raced as she realized she was trapped, alone and only minutes from death. She stumbled down the smoke-filled hallway, coughing, struggling to see through the red lights flashing across the ship. Every law of her people said she must never ask for human help, never show weakness before outsiders. But in that moment, as the floor shook under heavy fire, she knew she would not survive without a miracle. That miracle came in the form of a single human pilot. Ethan Carter was patrolling nearby space in his small fighter craft. He was not supposed to interfere. His orders were clear: observe, report, and never engage with alien affairs. But as he scanned the area, he caught the broken signal of Liara's ship. The reading showed life signs fading fast. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. Helping her could cost him his career, or his life. Then he remembered something his father once told him. If you see someone about to die, and you can help, you don't ask for permission. You act. Ethan pushed his controls forward, breaking formation. His fighter roared toward the alien ship, ignoring the warnings from his command center. He knew they were shouting in his ear, demanding he stand down. But he silenced the channel and flew straight into danger. The enemy fighters noticed him at once. They turned, their weapons glowing as they targeted the human intruder. Ethan weaved his craft through the storm of plasma fire, every second closer to death. But his eyes were locked on the burning alien vessel. When he reached her ship, he fired a burst of cover shots, forcing the attackers to scatter for a moment. Smoke and debris floated like ghosts around the broken hull. Ethan docked his craft with the side of the diplomat's vessel, sealing the hatch against the vacuum. He didn't know who was inside, only that someone needed him. Inside, Liara was on her knees. The heat was rising, her vision blurring, her lungs aching for clean air. She thought she saw shadows moving through the smoke, enemy soldiers coming to finish her. But then the door burst open and a tall figure stepped through. It was not one of her kind. It was a human. Ethan's suit was scorched, his helmet cracked, but his eyes burned with determination. He reached out a hand without a word. Liara stared at it, torn between fear and disbelief. Every teaching of her people told her humans were reckless, dangerous, unworthy of trust. Yet here he was, standing in the fire, offering her a chance to live. Her strength was nearly gone, but she placed her hand in his. Ethan pulled her up, carrying her weight over his shoulder. The ship groaned around them, explosions echoing through the halls. He moved fast, guiding her back toward the docking point. Behind them, fire swallowed the walls and sparks rained from the ceiling like falling stars. As they reached the hatch, an explosion rocked the vessel. Ethan shielded Liara with his own body, taking the hit of falling debris. Pain shot through him, but he did not stop. He pushed her through the doorway into his fighter. For the first time, Liara looked at him not as an enemy, not as a stranger, but as a protector. She saw his face in the flickering light, grim and resolute, willing to die for someone he did not even know. They sealed the hatch just as the alien ship tore apart in the silence of space. Ethan strapped her into the co-pilot seat, his hands moving quickly over the controls. Enemy fighters were circling again, ready to strike. He glanced at Liara and gave her the smallest of smiles. "Hold on," he said. The fighter engines roared to life, surging forward as enemy fire lit up the darkness. Liara's heart pounded. She had been raised to believe humans were selfish creatures. But this one had chosen to risk everything for her. As the stars blurred past the canopy glass, Liara realized her life was no longer her own. It now carried the weight of a debt she could never repay. And somewhere deep inside, fear mixed with something else, something she could not name yet. For the first time in her life, Liara felt that her destiny had changed. And it had begun with one human who defied orders and saved her life. Liara woke slowly, her body heavy and her mind clouded. For a moment, she thought she was still inside her burning ship, surrounded by smoke and fire. But when her eyes opened, she saw something strange. The walls around her were white, smooth, and bright with soft lights. Machines hummed quietly, and the air smelled clean. She was lying on a medical bed. Then the truth struck her. She was not on her ship anymore. She was inside a human facility. Her heart froze. According to the laws of her people, this was forbidden. No alien, not even a diplomat, was allowed to depend on human aid. It was written clearly in the codes of honor. If your life is saved by an outsider, you must deny the debt, or risk dishonor for all your kind. Those words echoed in her head like a curse. But the memory of the rescue returned. Flames, collapsing metal, and the human pilot carrying her through fire with his own body burning. She remembered his eyes, steady and determined, and the simple words he spoke before the engines roared. "Hold on." Liara sat up too quickly, pain cutting through her ribs. A sharp gasp escaped her lips. The noise drew attention. The door hissed open and Ethan entered. He was no longer in his scorched flight suit. Instead, he wore the simple dark uniform of a human pilot. His arm was bandaged and his face carried fresh bruises, but his movements were calm, steady. When his eyes met hers, he paused as if unsure how she would react. "You're awake," he said softly. Liara stared at him, torn between gratitude and fear. Her instinct told her to thank him, to bow her head, to admit that he had saved her life. But the weight of her people's law pressed against her chest. To speak such words would mark her as disloyal. She would be judged, punished, maybe even exiled. Still, she could not stop herself from asking the question burning in her heart. "Why?" Her voice was weak but sharp. "Why did you save me?" "You had no reason." Ethan's lips curved into a faint smile, not mocking but warm. "Because you were alive." That was reason enough. Simple words. Too simple. Yet they struck Liara harder than any weapon. Among her people, life was precious, but loyalty to law was greater. A soldier would let an ally die if rules demanded it. But this human had broken his orders, risked his rank and maybe his future, just to pull her from the fire. She shook her head, whispering more to herself than to him. "You don't understand. I am forbidden to accept this. My people will call me weak. They will call me—" She stopped before saying the final word. "Traitor." Ethan studied her, his eyes steady, searching her face as if trying to see the truth behind her fear. "I don't care about your laws," he said firmly. "I couldn't watch you die. Sometimes. Rules are wrong." The words left her stunned. No one among her kind would ever speak like that. For them, law was not only right, it was sacred. To suggest otherwise was unthinkable. Yet this human spoke it so calmly, as though it was the most natural thought in the universe. Before she could answer, alarms sounded outside the room. Red lights flashed and a human officer appeared in the doorway. "Pilot Carter, command requests you immediately. The Council of Liara's people has sent urgent communication. They demand her return at once." Ethan glanced at Liara, concern in his eyes, before he followed the officer. She was left alone again, her mind storming. Her people already knew. They had discovered she was rescued by a human. They would not praise her survival. No, they would call it a stain on her honor, a shame upon her title. She imagined their voices. She owes her life to an outsider. She is no longer fit to lead, and yet against her fear she felt something new, something dangerous. She felt drawn to the human who had defied rules for her. She remembered how he had shielded her body with his own, how his eyes held no judgment, only determination. Gratitude swelled inside her chest like a secret fire. When Ethan returned later, she was still sitting on the bed, her thoughts heavy. He looked tired but calm. "They're taking you back tomorrow," he said. She nodded slowly. She should have felt relief. Returning home meant safety. But instead her chest ached with a strange dread. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice trembling, "do you regret saving me?" He tilted his head, surprised by the question. Then he smiled faintly, though his eyes carried a shadow of sadness. "Not for a second." His answer warmed her in a way she could not explain. But fear struck her again. She knew her people would never forgive her for even speaking with him this way. She knew her gratitude was dangerous. And yet deep inside, a quiet voice whispered that her destiny was already changing. That night, Liara could not sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw fire, smoke, and Ethan's hand reaching out through the flames. She heard his words, "Sometimes rules are wrong." For the first time in her life, she wondered, what if he was right? What if her people's laws were not perfect? and with that thought she felt both terror and hope. The journey back to Liara's world began the next morning. A sleek alien cruiser arrived to collect her, its black hull glinting like polished stone. Human officers guided her to the docking bay with formal respect, but their eyes carried unease. They knew the aliens were not here to thank them. They were here to take her back to judge her survival. Ethan walked beside her, his uniform neat but his jaw tight. He kept his hands behind his back like a soldier under watch, but his eyes never left hers. Neither of them spoke. Too many ears were listening. Yet in that silence, Liara felt something stronger than words. Every step echoed with the weight of goodbye. When they reached the cruiser, alien guards bowed stiffly, avoiding Ethan's gaze as if he were a disease. They ushered Liara inside with cold precision. Before the hatch sealed, she turned her head. For a brief moment, her eyes met Ethan's. He gave a small nod, steady, reassuring, final. The door closed and he was gone. Inside the cruiser, Liara was treated with formality, not kindness. A private chamber was prepared for her, but it felt more like a gilded cage. Guards stood outside at all times. The whispers of officers followed her down the corridors. Saved by a human. Unfit to lead. A shame on her name. Each word cut deeper than a blade. But in the quiet of her chamber, when no one was watching, her thoughts returned again and again to the human pilot. She remembered his voice, calm even in fire. She remembered his body shielding hers from falling steel. She remembered the strange warmth she had felt when he said, "Not for a second." She should have hated herself for remembering. Instead, she found herself holding on to those memories like stolen treasures. Days later, she stood before the High Council. The great chamber was carved from crystal and stone, filled with the echo of stern voices. The elders questioned her survival. They praised her mission, then quickly turned sharp. Your ship was destroyed. Your mission compromised. And yet you live. Because of a human? Liara kept her face calm, her voice steady. Yes, a human saved me. The words caused gasps to ripple across the hall. The elders' eyes narrowed. One leaned forward, his voice cold as ice. Do you admit, then, that you owe him your life? The silence stretched like a knife at her throat. Tradition demanded she say no. That she claim her survival was her own doing. That she deny any debt to outsiders. But the memory of Ethan's hand reaching through smoke burned inside her. For a moment she almost spoke the forbidden truth. At the last second she bowed her head. No, I live because it was fate. Nothing more. The council nodded, satisfied. But inside Liara felt her chest ache with shame. She had spoken the words they wanted, but her heart knew it was a lie. That night she returned to her chamber. She sat alone, her mind restless. She could not speak of Ethan, she could not honor him. Yet his presence lingered with her like a shadow. She thought of his smile, faint but genuine. She thought of his defiance of rules, his belief that sometimes rules are wrong. And she wondered, was her silence also wrong? Her hand trembled as she touched the console on her desk. With careful fingers, she opened a secure channel, one forbidden for personal use. For a long moment, she stared at the blinking cursor, debating. Sending a message to him would risk everything, her rank, her freedom, maybe even her life. Finally, she typed 3 words. Are you safe? Her chest pounded as she sent the signal. It was short, simple, but enough to reach him. She quickly closed the channel, her breath shaky. Hours passed. She almost convinced herself the message had been lost. Then the console beeped softly. A reply, yes, are you? A rush of warmth filled her chest. She should not have felt joy, but she did. She typed back carefully, I am watched. But I remember. The reply came slower this time, but when it appeared, her heart raced. So do I. For the first time since she returned home, Liara smiled. It was small, secret, and hidden in the shadows of her room. She knew their bond was dangerous. She knew the council would call it weakness, even betrayal. But deep inside, she could not deny the truth anymore. The human had saved her body. Now his memory was saving her spirit. As the stars outside her window glowed against the endless night, Liara whispered to herself, this is madness. But she did not close the channel, and in the silence of forbidden words and secret signals, a bond began to grow, quiet, fragile, but stronger than the laws that tried to break it. The High Council wasted no time. Within days of Liara's return, whispers turned into accusations and accusations turned into judgment. She was summoned again to the Crystal Chamber, this time not as a diplomat but as a suspect. The chamber was filled with harsh light, so bright it made her feel exposed. The elders sat high above, their robes heavy with authority, their faces carved with disapproval. Soldiers lined the walls, silent but their eyes sharp. Liara stood alone in the center, her heart steady but heavy. An elder's voice thundered across the chamber. "You returned alive because of a human. Already lesser worlds question our strength. They say our diplomat owed her life to outsiders. Tell us, Liara, are you loyal to our laws or to him?" The word struck her like a blade. To admit the truth was impossible. To deny it was another kind of death. She raised her chin, forcing her voice not to tremble. "I am loyal to my people. I am loyal to peace," but the elder's eyes narrowed. "Peace is not the question. Obedience is," gasps rippled through the chamber. Everyone knew what this trial was. Not about survival, not about her mission, but about loyalty. Would she bow completely to the law, or would she risk everything by defying it? Her silence stretched too long. She could feel the council reading her hesitation, weighing it as proof of guilt. At last she bowed her head. "I do not serve humans. I serve my people." The words burned in her throat. She hated herself for saying them, but she could not bring herself to betray Ethan openly. Still, even as she spoke, she felt their eyes pierce her soul, searching for cracks. Later, when she returned to her chamber, her heart pounded with anger and fear. She wanted to scream. She wanted to break free of their endless laws. And more than anything, she wanted to hear Ethan's voice again. Her console blinked faintly in the dark. A new message. "Are you safe?" She swallowed hard. Just seeing his words made her chest ache. She typed back with shaking fingers. "They test me. I must lie. I cannot tell them about you." His reply came quickly. "Do what you must. I understand. But remember, you don't owe them your soul." Her hands froze above the keys. She stared at his words, so simple, so human, and yet they felt truer than all the grand speeches of her council. But even as she read, the door to her chamber slid open. 2 guards stepped inside, their expressions cold. Liara, one said, "You are restricted from private channels. You are under suspicion. If we find you speaking with outsiders..." He left the threat unfinished, but the weight of it was clear. They swept through her room, searching the console. Liara's heart nearly stopped, but she had erased the messages only moments before. Still, the danger had grown sharper. Every word, every thought could be used against her now. That night, sleep would not come. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. She remembered Ethan's voice, the warmth in his eyes, the way he had shielded her without hesitation. She remembered the council's cold stares, their obsession with law over life. Her soul twisted with conflict. Was loyalty measured by blind obedience? Or was it measured by courage to do what was right? The next morning, the council summoned her again. This time the chamber was filled not only with elders, but also with young diplomats, soldiers, and scribes. They wanted witnesses. They wanted an example. The elder rose, his voice echoing. "Liara, you stand accused of dishonor. Tell us now, before all, will you renounce this human? Will you swear before the stars that his actions mean nothing to you?" The hall went silent. Every eye was on her. Every breath waited for her answer. Liara's chest tightened. She saw Ethan's face in her mind. She heard his words. Sometimes rules are wrong. Her lips parted, but no words came. To renounce him would be a lie that killed her spirit. To honor him would be treason. Finally, she whispered, "He is not nothing." The chamber exploded with gasps and shouts. Elders slammed their staffs in fury. Soldiers stepped forward as if ready to drag her away. The elder's voice cut through the chaos, sharp as a blade. "Then you are no longer one of us. Your loyalty is broken." Liara stood frozen as the hall erupted around her. Some younger diplomats whispered in shock, others in awe. For the first time, a crack had appeared in the council's wall of authority. But she knew the cost. She had defied them. That night, locked in her chamber under heavy guard, she opened the console one last time. Her fingers trembled as she typed the truth. "They know. I could not deny you. Whatever comes next, remember, I do not regret the message sent." No matter what happened now, she had chosen. Her loyalty no longer belonged to law. It belonged to truth. Ethan had returned to his base with nothing but silence from Liara. Days stretched into weeks, and though part of him knew she was back with her people, safe, another part could not rest. He kept replaying their last moment together, the way her eyes had searched his before the cruiser door sealed. He had risked his career, his life, and for what? For a bond he could not explain. But then, late one night, his console blinked with an encrypted signal. The message was short, hurried, and almost trembling. They are planning war. Trust no one. Be ready. His blood turned cold. He knew it was from Liara. At once he rushed to command and reported the warning. But his superiors looked at him with suspicion. A secret message from an alien under trial. How do we know this isn't a trick? The general demanded. Others muttered that Ethan was compromised, blinded by personal feelings. Ethan's fists clenched. He had expected resistance, but the dismissal burned. If we ignore this, people will die. She risked everything to send this message. The general shook his head. You will not act without orders. Do you understand? But Ethan did not answer. He only saluted, his jaw tight, and left the room. Deep down, he knew what he had to do. That night, he prepped his fighter craft in secret. He loaded extra fuel, calibrated the weapons, and checked every system by hand. He wasn't going to wait for permission. If Liara said war was coming, then he would be ready, even if no one else believed. When he launched into the dark void, he felt a strange calm. Alone, yes, but determined. Hours later, his sensors lit up. A fleet of alien warships had slipped into the system, their signatures hidden until now. His stomach dropped. Liara had been right. They were preparing for battle. And his commanders had no idea. He sent warnings across the human channels, but before he could finish, a dozen enemy fighters broke formation and locked onto him. His console screamed with alarms. Red lights flared. Target acquired. Plasma fire streaked past his canopy. Ethan rolled hard, weaving between the blasts, but the numbers were against him. 12 against 1. His fighter shuddered as a bolt grazed the wing. Sparks flew, and the control stick jerked in his hands. He fought back, releasing counterfire, striking down one enemy with a burst of missiles, but more closed in, surrounding him like wolves around prey. His breathing grew heavy. He had seconds, maybe less. Inside the alien flagship, Liara watched the battle unfold on a glowing screen. Her people believed she was under guard, but she had found her way to the command chamber, desperate to see what was happening. When she saw the human fighter alone, outnumbered, her heart stopped. It was him. Ethan. Her chest tightened as she saw his ship shudder under enemy fire. He was fighting against her own people, fighting to survive, and no one moved to stop it. An elder noticed her frozen expression. So the human defies us again. He will die tonight, and you will see how foolish your loyalty is. Liara's hands curled into fists. Every instinct screamed at her to stay silent, to obey, to let fate take its course. But she couldn't, not this time. Not when the one who saved her life was about to lose his. She turned and sprinted toward the hangar. Guards shouted after her, but she didn't stop. She leapt into her personal cruiser, sealing the hatch before they could drag her back. Her fingers flew across the controls. For the first time in her life, she was not a diplomat, not a prisoner of law. She was a fighter. The engines roared to life and she launched into space, her ship streaking toward the battle. On Ethan's console, alarms screamed louder. His shields were failing. A second hit ripped across his hull and smoke filled the cabin. His eyes narrowed. If this was his last fight, he would go down striking. But then a sudden blast cut through the enemy line, not at him, but at the ships chasing him. An alien cruiser darted into the fray, firing with precision, scattering his attackers. Ethan blinked in shock. That ship, it wasn't human. It was one of theirs. And then, the comm channel crackled to life. A familiar voice filled his ears, strong and fierce. Ethan, hold on. You're not alone. It was Liara. His chest tightened with relief, but also disbelief. She had chosen to fight her own people, for him. Her cruiser shielded his wounded fighter, absorbing the next wave of fire. Together they fought side by side, weaving through the chaos, striking down enemy after enemy. For every shot Ethan fired, Liara was there to cover him. For every blast aimed at her, Ethan pushed forward to protect her flank. But the battle was far from over. The alien fleet was massive, and soon both their ships were surrounded again. Ethan's hands shook on the controls and sweat dripped down his brow. Liara's voice returned, steady despite the danger. If saving you is treason, then let it be. Her words hit him harder than the fire outside. She had made her choice. And as the enemy closed in once more, the two of them braced for the storm together, defiant, united, and unafraid. The battle in orbit raged like fire on water. Human fighters scrambled to defend their stations while the alien fleet pressed forward with brutal force. But in the middle of the chaos, two ships fought as one, Ethan's battered fighter and Liara's sleek cruiser. Her people watched in shock as she fired not at humans, but at her own kind. Every blast she unleashed shattered the silence of tradition. Every maneuver was a strike not only against enemy fighters, but against centuries of law. Inside her ship, Liara's hand shook on the controls, but her voice was steady as she opened a wide communication channel. Her face appeared on the screens of every alien vessel in the fleet. "I am Liara, diplomat of the Outer Alliance, and I will not let this war destroy everything. This human saved me when he had no reason. He risked his life when his orders told him not to. If that is weakness, then I choose weakness. If that is treason, then I choose treason." Gasps filled the command chambers across the fleet. Officers stared at their screens in disbelief. Some shouted for her arrest, others for her execution. The elders still on the flagship roared with fury. "Turn off her broadcast," one demanded. "She has lost her mind." But others hesitated. For the first time, a crack had appeared in their iron control. Younger soldiers whispered among themselves. They had seen her words, her defiance, and some of them wondered if she was right. Ethan's voice broke through her comm channel, raw and urgent. "Liara, they'll brand you an enemy forever. You don't have to do this." She smiled faintly even as plasma fire shook her cruiser. "Yes, I do. Because you showed me something my people forgot. Life matters more than law." Her words lit a fire inside him. For the first time, he realized she wasn't only fighting to save him, she was fighting to change everything. The alien fleet began to tighten its circle around them. Orders echoed across the channels. "Destroy the traitor, destroy the human." Ships surged forward, their weapons glowing. Liara braced herself. Her cruiser's shields flickered, barely holding. "Ethan, if they break through, you must escape." "Do you hear me?" "You cannot die here," he laughed bitterly, shaking his head. "And leave you? Not a chance." Their ships dived together, dodging bursts of fire. Ethan struck down two attackers, but his fighter trembled, every system screaming warnings. Liara's ship took the brunt of another blast, sparks filling her cabin. Pain flared across her chest as alarms shrieked. Then a message cut across all channels, an elder's voice sharp and merciless. "Liara of the Alliance, you are hereby stripped of title and rank. You are marked traitor. Your life is forfeit." The words stabbed her like ice. She had expected them, but still the finality hurt. She was no longer one of them. No longer a diplomat, no longer a daughter of her world. And yet strangely, she felt free. She turned her ship sharply, placing herself between Ethan and the enemy line. Her voice rang across the comm again, defiant and clear. "Then I am guilty. But know this, if our laws demand the death of those who show mercy, then our laws are broken, and I will not follow them." Her broadcast spread not only to the fleet but also to listening human channels. Officers, soldiers, even civilians began to hear her words. Shock turned into silence, silence into murmurs, murmurs into questions. Ethan fired alongside her, his voice low but fierce. "You just declared war on your own council." Liara's lips curved into a small, determined smile. "No, I just declared war on their blindness." The enemy pressed closer, but then something unexpected happened. A few alien ships hesitated. Their weapons powered down. Young captains, moved by her words, refused to fire. Confusion rippled across the fleet. Some still attacked, but others wavered. Ethan saw the hesitation and seized the chance. "Liara, they're listening." "You're breaking through," her heart raced. For the first time, hope sparked through the fire. Maybe this defiance was not only for her survival, but for the survival of peace itself. Still, danger surrounded them. More fighters swarmed, and her cruiser shook violently. Systems failed one by one. Smoke filled her cabin, choking her. "Ethan," she whispered, "if I don't make it, promise me you'll keep fighting for peace. Don't let this end with me." His voice came back strong, steady, unyielding. "Don't talk like that. We're both making it out together." Another explosion rattled her ship, but she forced her hands to steady. Her people had cast her aside. Her laws had betrayed her. But she was not broken. Not while he still fought beside her. And as the stars blazed with fire around them, Liara's defiance turned into something greater. A spark of rebellion carried across the skies. The battlefield was chaos. Explosions tore through the black sky, lighting the void like thunder without sound. Human ships clashed with alien fighters, each side desperate to strike first. In the center of it all, Liara's cruiser and Ethan's battered fighter flew side by side, two sparks of defiance against the storm. But the odds were crushing. For every enemy they destroyed, more appeared. Liara's shields flickered like fading fireflies. Ethan's hull was cracked, alarm screaming in his ears. He tasted blood where he had bitten his tongue, but still he fought on. Inside the alien flagship, the High Council watched in fury. Elders shouted commands demanding her destruction. Yet their voices trembled with something new, fear. For the first time, their authority was cracking, not from outside attack, but from one of their own. On smaller ships across the fleet, young captains and soldiers hesitated. Some had already lowered their weapons after hearing Liara's broadcast. Others still obeyed orders, but doubt gnawed at them. Was she truly a traitor? Or was she the only one brave enough to speak the truth? Liara felt her body weaken as smoke filled her cabin, but her spirit burned hotter than ever. She opened a channel to the entire battlefield, her voice clear despite the chaos. You call me traitor, but I ask you this. What is loyalty if it demands we kill those who show mercy? What is law if it forces us to turn away from life itself? A human saved me when he had nothing to gain. He chose compassion over rules, and today I choose the same. Her words carried across both fleets, human and alien. Soldiers paused, their fingers hovering over triggers. Commanders clenched their teeth, unsure if their orders would still be obeyed. Ethan's heart pounded as he listened. Even under fire, her voice made him believe the impossible, that one act of courage could change everything, but the elders would not allow it. From the flagship, a final command rang out. Destroy them both. End this rebellion now. Dozens of alien fighters surged forward, weapons charged, surrounding Ethan and Liara in a deadly circle. There was no escape. Ethan's hands tightened on the controls, sweat dripping into his eyes. This was it. Then, before he could act, Liara did something no one expected. She turned her cruiser sharply and placed herself directly between the enemy line and Ethan's wounded fighter. Her ship's shields, already weak, flared bright as she absorbed the first wave of fire. Ethan shouted in protest. Liara, get out of the way! You'll be killed! Her voice came back, soft but steady. If saving you means my end, then let it be. Because your people must know, my people must know. One life can change many. The enemy fired again, and her cruiser shook violently. Sparks rained down, panels exploded, and alarms shrieked. Still, she held her position, shielding him with her very life. But her sacrifice had a greater effect than she realized. Across the alien fleet, soldiers watched in silence. They saw one of their own stand against centuries of law. Not for power, not for conquest, but for a single human life. And in that moment, something shifted. One by one, ships began to lower their weapons. A captain on the left flank refused to fire. Another followed. Soon, entire squadrons powered down their weapons, defying the council's orders. The rebellion spread like wildfire, hesitation turning into choice. The elders screamed with rage, but their voices were drowned out by silence, the silence of ships refusing to obey. Ethan saw it happening on his sensors. Liara, they're standing down. They're listening to you. Her chest ached, her vision blurred, but a faint smile touched her lips. Then maybe this was worth it. The enemy circle broke apart, ships drifting back, weapons cold. Human forces held their fire, stunned by the sudden cease. The battlefield grew quiet, not with victory, but with something more powerful. Hesitation, reflection, the chance for peace. Ethan guided his fighter close to her cruiser. Through the cracked glass of his canopy, he saw her pale face lit by dying lights. His throat tightened. Stay with me, Liara, please. Her voice was weak now, but still steady. Do not let this moment fade. Promise me. You'll fight for the peace we began. I promise, he said firmly, his voice breaking. Her eyes closed for a moment, then opened again, shining faintly. Good, then even if I fall, I have already won. The calm went silent. Her cruiser drifted, smoke trailing behind. Ethan's hands trembled as he fought to keep his fighter steady. He would not let her sacrifice be forgotten. Across the fleet, soldiers on both sides whispered her name. Not traitor, not exile, but something else. Defiant, courageous, unforgettable. That night, no final shot was fired. No war began. Instead, both sides withdrew, shaken by what they had seen. One alien's choice had stopped the first spark of war, and as Ethan's fighter carried Liara's silent cruiser back toward safety, he knew the truth. She had changed everything. Not with armies, not with weapons, but with defiance, and with the courage to believe that one life, one human act of mercy was worth more than law.